Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Continuing our discussion on Zuhd. Here, Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah alayhi, he says that to better conceptualize Zuhd, and Zuhd is asceticism, this idea of how do we as Muslims interact with the world. Now, it's very important to understand this, as inshallah I hope to kind of deepen our insights in regards to just the current world we're living in today. Zuhud is Islam or Muslims' attempt to reconcile between our two realities, our realities of this life and our realities of the afterlife. How do we reconcile between the two? Because in our minds, there is a clear contradiction, or there's a seeming contradiction between the two. And even in this day today, in our times today, how many people look at religion as being a type of either or? You're either religious at the expense of your worldly well-being, or you pursue worldly well-being at the expense of your afterlife. It's just one or the other. I remember this is how, when I was growing up, this is how I understood it. It's either or. If you become religious, you're saying Salaam alaikum to the world. Right? Or if you are very successful in the world, then religion is only going to be a hindrance. So it is a huge discussion. It's a very important one, and Zuhd comes to lay the foundations there. And of course, you have different scholars who will present Zuhd in very different ways, and there are extremes on both sides. Right? You have the extreme Zuhd of the spirituals who will come and say that Zuhd means we pretty much isolate ourselves from the world. That this world is cursed, anything that has to do with this world needs to be rejected, and they just go about living life as like hermits and monks and whatnot. No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this type of lifestyle is bid'ah. Ibtada'uha. It's not coming from Allah. Ma katabnaha alayhim. Right? Allah did not prescribe this lifestyle on His followers in religion. And that is this isolationist lifestyle. I'm going to isolate myself. I don't get married. I don't have kids. I don't have a job. I just worship Allah day in, day out. And you also have the other extreme of, as I was mentioning, that it's all about this world. How many times have you heard, it's the 21st century. We need to adopt. We need to change. We need to get with the times, right? That's another type of extreme. So let's go ahead and dive into this and better understand, well, what is Zuhd in terms of my responsibilities? How much of a Zahid do I need to be in front of Allah? And how do we go forward in terms of our times today? So Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah alayhi says that the first is a asceticism that is an obligation to every Muslim. Right? Every Muslim is obligated to do at least this amount of Zuhd. What is it? Az-zuhdu fil haram is letting go of haram. That's zuhud. So remember, zuhud is about disconnecting yourself in one way or another. Well, we are obligated to disconnect ourselves from that which is haram. And again, that is a type of zuhud. How so? Well, aren't there people out there doing haram? Of course. And what is haram? If you were to look at what is prohibited, whether that's relationships outside of marriage, drinking alcohol, gambling, among other things. Well, you'll find a common trait in all of these, or most of them. And that is these actions satisfy a human desire very quickly. They're like instant gratifications. Right? Somebody who has relationships outside of marriage lacks the patience to wait for marriage, right? Forget about our times today. But you growing up, everybody knew sooner or later, I'm going to get married. Right? And for you all, it's more sooner than later. But the idea is, everybody understood, we get married. And in marriage, you get to satisfy this desire. So when people have relationships outside of marriage, that's simply trying to hasten something that has not yet come. Alcohol is about, it's always around socializing. It's around having fun, enjoying yourself. Well, you're hastening a desire or satisfying a desire, right? So from that lens, the zuhud come, or I should say that because it's meant to satisfy a desire, a person is using the world to fulfill themselves. And so disconnecting and isolating oneself from haram is zuhud in a sense that you are avoiding certain aspects of life, of this world, what society has to offer you, in order for you to have a better standing in the afterlife. Why doesn't somebody drink? When a Muslim comes and says, I don't drink, well, why not? Everybody else is doing it. It's not taboo. It's not inaccessible. It's not meant for a certain status, people of certain status. Everybody and anyone does it. Right? There are no ramifications. There are no negative consequences for doing it, loosely speaking. So when a Muslim comes and says, I don't do it, well, why not? There is no other reason other than, well, there's an afterlife I'm accountable for. I mean, that's really what it is. Or else if somebody grows up not drinking alcohol because, well, my parents told me not to do it, sooner or later they're going to succumb. If that's the only reason, right? They're going to succumb. Yes, I understand that there are certain people who are not Muslim who don't drink alcohol because they understand how bad it is, right? I understand that that's there, but from the Muslim paradigm, Muslims choose not to drink. Why? Because they understand that there are negative consequences in the afterlife, right? And of course, there are negative consequences in this life. So it's a type of zuhud, and we are obligated to do this. So Muslims by default, Muslims who practice the faith, by default, our religion creates an amount of gap between you and this world. And this is kind of the bare minimum that you need in order to survive in the afterlife. Right? You see how this is being conceptualized? And we see the damage of not having this gap, because it's just from one thing to another, to another, to another. Human desire can never be satisfied. The Prophet ﷺ said so. Right? The Prophet ﷺ said, the child of Adam, if they were to have a valley of gold, they would want another. Isn't that the truth? Look at the billionaires. They want more. It's a desire, right? And the Prophet ﷺ says, nothing satisfies a child of Adam other than dirt. What is the Prophet ﷺ saying? Your desires have no limits. No matter how much you satisfy your desires, you will want something else. You will want more. Right? That's just how our desires are. And the only thing that will stop your desires is death. That's when your desires are done. That's it. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ points to this very concerning human trait. If you don't practice an amount of asceticism, you are falling into a type of abyss that can never, no matter how much you throw in it, it will never be filled. Period. Right? And hence again, look at the world that you see today. All the very strange behaviors, all the fetishes, all the very bizarre practices people are doing is because, what does that due to? Where's that coming from? Right? It's coming from a lack of regulating desires. You're free to do whatever you want. Okay, I've already done everything possible. Well, what's next? And again, you see this the most where? You see in the most extreme places where? In the very, very wealthy class. Right? They have satisfied every single desire. They don't know what to do. So they start inventing things that are absolutely gruesome and disgusting. Why? Just so that they can feel for a moment something new. Right? You see how dangerous that is? It's extremely dangerous. So Islam comes and creates a type of, at least an amount of gap between you and this world to keep you within a healthy lifestyle. Right? The second type of asceticism is that which is recommended, mustahab. Zuhdun mustahab. وهو على درجات في الاستحباب بحسب المزهود فيه وهو الزهد في المكروه وفضول المباحات والتفنن في الشهوات المباحة. See, Ibn Qayyim says that the next is an encouraged, mustahab. You are rewarded for doing this, but you're not sinful for not doing this. What is that? And that is leaving the things that are makruh, discouraged. For example, the Prophet ﷺ discouraged us from sleeping between Maghrib and Isha. Right? Why? Because, at least back in the day, people are awake from before sunrise or sunrise. And by the time, especially in the summer, the sun sets, you've had a long work day and you're exhausted. And so if you go to sleep right after Maghrib, you're not waking up. You're not waking up. Or at least you're going to miss Jama'ah. Right? Hence the companions of Allah Ta'ala anhum, they would go to the masjid and wait for Salat al-Isha, and they'd start dozing off, they'd start sleeping. That's how it was back then. So the Prophet ﷺ discouraged us from sleeping after Maghrib so that we don't miss Isha, or we don't miss at least Jama'ah. Right? So that's something that is makruh. Also, asceticism in permissible things that are more than what we need. More than what we need. In clothing, in food, in entertainment. There's an amount that we need, right? But there's an amount where it's just above and beyond. Now, I'll be very clear, culture does dictate what is needed, not from a legal perspective, but from a cultural kind of standpoint, what is needed versus what is extra. So having, 10 suits, let's say, for example, for a business person, is that extravagant? No. Why? Because in our culture, in our kind of our customs, you can't wear the same clothes, right? And you need time to wash it. So having 10 suits is pretty reasonable. But back in the day, having 10 thawbs, that's above and beyond, right? So we're going to have to incorporate that. But the idea is, do you need more clothing? Do you really need more clothing? Do you really need more food? Do you really need all this entertainment? What do you need? Again, we're not saying this stuff is haram. We're not saying if you go and you buy some clothing just because you want to. We're not saying you're doing something haram. But this zuhd is mustahab. You are encouraged to do it. You're rewarded for doing it. Why? Because now you're creating an even greater gap between you and this world by disposing the things that aren't necessary for your success in this life or the afterlife. Why do you need it? Really? And I believe in Muqayyim rahmatullah mentions, I forgot where he mentions this. I think it's actually a little bit later in the book. He mentions that one of the reasons why their behaviors become extreme is because of their lack of moderation when it comes to consumption. Consumption of food, consumption of clothing, consumption of these mubahat. And hence the companions radiallahu ta'ala anhum would avoid that which is mubah in fear of it taking them down a less productive road.
So mubah, right?
Mubah is that which is permissible.
Which is permissible.
That which is permissible, yeah. Green tea is permissible. Right? Coffee is permissible. Clothing is, most types of clothing are permissible. This is what we're talking about here. Do I need this? Is this really necessary for me? And again, we're going to include under that which is needed or necessary, again, not from a legal standpoint, but from a kind of a human psychological, personal standpoint. An amount of entertainment is needed. Right? Why? Because you gotta get things off your shoulders. You gotta rest. You gotta relax. Right? An amount of that is needed. And this whole, from the moment I wake up to the moment I sleep, I am working. That's unnatural. It's unhuman. We weren't created for that. In fact, that goes against some hadith. Right? It's narrated, although this isn't a hadith, but it's narrated, and scholars have accepted it. And no doubt the meaning is true. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a narration says, Ya ibadi, forgetting the wording here, but the meaning is, I didn't create you, or I created you for worship. So don't play around. Don't take life as a game, as just play and joy and fun and entertainment. And I guarantee you your rizq. So don't overdo it. Don't tire yourself too much. We weren't created just to make money. Right? And now you have this fad of hyper-masculine people who are kind of motivating this generation, and you got to work hard, you got to work hard. And there's an element of truth to that. But we got to work harder in a more balanced way. Many hadith say you have a right over yourself has a right over you. Allah has a right over you. Your family has a right over you. So give everything its due right. Right? And this whole work day in, day out, don't sacrifice a moment of your time, right, for anybody but money and your career and your success. That is a type of extremism. Right? Rather, you have to give your job its due right. You have to strive, you have to succeed. I'm not trying to demote that. The more you succeed in the world, the easier of a life you give for your children. Right? But if that's not balanced with ibadah, right, giving Allah His rights, making sure spiritually speaking I'm healthy, then it goes off the rails. Right? So we got to be careful in terms of that which is makruh, that which is discouraged. We got to be careful over excessive consumption of that which is permissible. And then this third thing, Ibn al-Qayyim rahmatullahi alayhi says, is becoming very tafannun. How can I translate this? Being very artistic in, I don't even know if this is the proper word, but I'll just go with it. Being very artistic in satisfying your desires, your permissible desires. Being very artistic. What do I mean by that? Thinking of different ways of satisfying your desires. You know, I have a hobby of cooking. I like cooking. I do. For whatever reason, it relaxes me. And I find that when I'm a little bit more stressed out, I'm telling myself, I'm going to go home and I'm going to cook something. I don't like, it's not traditional foods and whatnot. I like cooking salsas. I like cooking more street type foods, right? And I think I'm good at it. There's just something satisfying about it to me. It's the noise that you hear, the food cooking, it's the smell, it's the colors. Then you enjoy it, right? And so I was reading a work by Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, and he comes across and he says, you know, he starts rebuking those who are very meticulous when it comes to food, like the colors and how you play and all. He said these people are foolish people. I'm like, okay, you know, that goes back to me. This artistic pursuits of satisfying your desires is very unhealthy. Why? Because the point is what? Satisfying your desires. You know, why do you plate food? In fancy restaurants, plating is absolutely huge. And it's for a reason. They say you eat with your eyes before you eat with your mouth. Right? And the portioning and how everything is set up and the different colors. Sometimes they'll add certain herbs just for color. Say, we'll add this for color. Right? Why? So it's satisfying to the eyes. There's nothing haram about that. And if you're inviting guests, by all means, because that's part of hospitality, and hospitality is rewarded in Islam. We're talking about desires that are purely mubah, purely permissible. If there is no greater goal behind it, the only goal is to satisfy your desires, that's dangerous. Why? Because your desires are dangerous. How long will it be before that type of food, that type of plating, that type of thing is no longer satisfying your desires? And then the mind is confused. Well, this used to provide me with satisfaction. Now it's not. What do I do? Where do I go? And this is most dangerous when it comes to marital relationships. Getting bored of each other. And please excuse, I'm trying to be as polite in my language, but this is real. This is real. They no longer are able to satisfy each other. They got bored of each other in this sense. Even if the relationship is healthy, they get bored of each other. And so what do they resort to? They still have this desire. They don't know how to satisfy it. They don't know how to fulfill it. And they start doing very haram practices. And Muslims aren't immune to this. This happens within the Muslim community as well. I don't even want to start to share some of these practices. So why? This pursuit of being very artistic, trying something new. It's very dangerous. So we got to be careful of this. Again, trying new things, new ways to satisfy yourself. We're not saying that's haram so long what you're satisfying yourself with is not haram. Going to a fancy restaurant isn't haram so long as what you're eating is permissible. Right? Trying new drinks isn't haram so long as it's permissible, but you got to be very conscious. To what extent am I going to go to satisfy my desires? Well, how do we navigate this? Because you have everything. You have everything at your disposal here. How do you manage this? Well, in two ways. Number one, by creating for yourself a system that forces you to make decisions not based on your desires. How so? Let's say you go to a restaurant, right? Well, I have this problem. I'm afraid of satisfying my desires. Okay, well, if you go to a restaurant and let's say you have a favorite meal, always choose that one. It's your favorite for a reason, right? So there's an amount of enjoyment there, but there's an amount of limitation there. I'm limiting myself to a certain choice. That's enough to satisfy me. I'm enjoying myself, but it's not too free or unregulated to where I become out of balance. That's one way. Or to say, for example, number 2 of the special meal or the special menu. What's your special menu? I'll take number 2. Again, of course, so long as it's not pork or something like that, right? You see what the point here? Okay, well, we're going to this place. Oh, I'm familiar with this restaurant. Let's just go ahead and eat there, right? Or giving the choice to somebody else. Okay, child, how about you choose the restaurant? You're not the one choosing it. So it's not really appeasing your desire. It's not giving your desire that authority. That's one way of doing it. The second way of doing it is by having a greater goal behind it. I'm going to go to a fancy restaurant, but my goal isn't to appease my desire. My goal is to refresh, rejuvenate, strengthen my relationship with my spouse. My goal is to be hospitable to my guest. My goal is to maintain my relationship with a friend. Hey, I'm inviting you to this place. You see what I mean here? The goal isn't to fulfill desire. The goal is more of a shari'i goal. Now we limit it. Okay? So that's the second type of zuhud we need to be aware of. The third is zuhd al-dakhilina fi hadha sha'n وهم المشمرون في السير إلى الله وهو نوعان أحدهما الزهد في الدنيا جملة and what's this? النوع الثاني الزهد في نفسك. Okay, so the third type of zuhud is kind of the more, all right, we're doing zuhud in kind of the maximum capacity, and that is, we're going to look at it from two ways. How do we engage the world? That's one. And the second is, how do we engage the self? Right? What do you mean? How can I do zuhud of the self? Well, don't you see what's going on in the world? How much the industry of self-development is growing? Yoga, self-care, self kind of beauty products. Don't you see that? How when you go to a barber or a hairstylist, the detail, right? How to have a glowing face, how to have smell the best, how to do. Again, the issue here isn't what's halal and haram. The issue here is, how do I have a healthy engagement with this world while having a healthy engagement or preparation for the afterlife? Right? So, how do we do it? Now let's start with the first one. الزهد في الدنيا جملة. How do we navigate our relationship with this world? And as we've discussed before, the idea here is in isolation. It's not about how do I isolate myself from the world, but rather how do I have a healthy relationship, a healthy connection to this world. We are here for a reason. Allah created us, and before He ever created us, what did He say? I'm making for this earth a successor. Meaning Allah created us to put us here initially. And He created the universe in a way that caters to who? To the human being. وَالْأَرْضَ وَضَعَهَا لِلْأَنَامِ. Allah made the earth for the creatures that live on this earth. The center of all these creatures is the human being. Right? الذي هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبكم فامشوا في مناكبها. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He made this earth for you so that you can easily navigate it. So to completely isolate oneself, disconnect oneself from the world is counterproductive. It goes against the wisdom of Allah. But there's a healthy way, a healthy connection, there's an unhealthy connection. What we see in the world today, how people engage the world, is unhealthy. So what is that healthy connection? Well, you have the spiritual side. Understanding the purpose of this world. Why did Allah create the world? See, in Christianity, there's this book, very interesting book called The Religious Origins of Modernity. Now, I don't have time to get into all the details, but one of the points that the author makes is that people began to interpret Christianity in a way that laid the foundations of what we see today. How so? Look at colonialism. When the West began to invade pretty much the world. Based on what? They had governments, right? And the governments would need to spend tremendous amount of money in order to do these things. So they're not just going to make the decision, yeah, let's go ahead and do it, let's see what happens. They need to be convinced that this is the right thing to do. And although, the Enlightenment had already occurred, there were still Christian sentiments. The Bible still played a role back then. How were they convinced? By taking a verse, now this isn't the exact verse, but a meaning within the Bible that says that God created the earth for humans. Right? What does that mean? Well, we have similar verses. I just mentioned some of them. But to us, what does that mean? Allah created the earth for humans. Well, it means He created it in a way that shows His blessings upon us. Allah is taking care of us and thus submit to Him. They began to understand this as we were created on this earth to dominate it. And since we're Christians, we're the best people, we are God's people, it is our religious right and duty to go to the world and civilize them because we're the best, to dominate them. This is how they understood it. You see the imbalance? So they saw the world as something to be dominated. And you see in their policies, don't you? Wherever they go, it's just domination. We're the best people. We understand the world the best. We have the best civilization. We have the best code of morality. And if you follow us, you're civilized. If you don't follow us, you're uncivilized. This is the domination mindset. We just dominate. Right? And that's their relationship with the world. We're here to dominate. Okay, how does a Muslim understand the world? Allah created us, we mentioned. Allah created us to put us on this earth, and He put us on this earth for a wisdom. What is that? And Allah mentions in the Quran, Allahu alladhi خلق سبع سماوات ومن الأرض مثلهن يتنزل الأمر بينهن. Allah says, Allah created the 7 heavens, and similarly 7 layers of earth, and sent revelation between the two. Why? لِتَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ قَدْ أَحَاطَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عِلْمًا. Why did Allah create this? So that you get to know Him. You get to know, by looking at the world around you, you get to know Allah is the authority, He is the sovereign, He is in power, and Allah is all-knowing. To rephrase this, the reason why we are here is not to dominate the earth. It's not to consume everything on earth. It's not to satisfy our desires. And by the way, this goes back to Enlightenment theories and thoughts. Right? It's not these things. The reason why we are here is to serve as a transition from the beginning of our existence to our final abode, so that we get to learn about who Allah is, so that when we are neighbors to Him in the afterlife, we truly enjoy it. That's the purpose. You see the difference? When I understand I'm here to get to know Allah, and it's temporary, consumption isn't my primary goal. That's not why I'm here. I'm not here to fulfill my desires. My desires are only here to maintain a certain amount of well-being and to maintain the human species and to enjoy and to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? That's why. And so a healthy relationship to the world is one that acknowledges and centralizes two aspects. What is our purpose? Why did Allah put us here? And number two, the temporary reality of this world. If you live life by these two things, that is the essence of zuhud. Okay, well, does that mean now I'm going to not enjoy anything in this world? Absolutely not. You are going to enjoy certain things in this world. But when you enjoy them, what is central to your enjoyment is the fact that Allah has blessed you with something. And so you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more. Now there's a weak hadith that basically says, learn to love Allah by seeing His blessings upon you. When you enjoy a certain food, in the Muslim mind, in the mind of an ascetic, Allah has created this in a way and created me in a way where I can enjoy it. Isn't that truly a sign of Allah's hospitality, so to speak? He could have made it very painful. He could have made it bland, unenjoyable, right? But food, which is necessary to our survival, is something that's enjoyable. Marriage, which is necessary for our survival, how does Allah portray it? It's an institution that's meant to provide or to offer you stability, peace. And He's put love and mercy between you two. That's how it should be, right? We're off today. We're trying to fix that. It's not going to happen for a generation, but the idea is what? Your desires aren't meant, the primary purpose of desires is not to bring you joy and happiness, but rather to teach you about Allah and to maintain your well-being. That's why. This is a healthy relationship with the world. Now you see how in the business world, how people act. If your purpose in life, you see the world, the mindset is domination, self-satisfaction, fulfilling your desires, what kind of a work environment is that going to create? A very hostile one, a very competitive one, a very vicious one. But if my understanding of desires or the world is a temporary phase that's meant to teach me about Allah, where does money fall under this? It's there, but it's definitely not number one rank. Hence the very well-known story of early Andalusia. A man goes to the market. This is a spy from Europe. He's seeing the Muslims. What's the state of Muslims? He goes to a market to buy something. And the man said, I've sold enough today, but my neighbor hasn't. Go buy from him. In the Western, not just the Western mind, in the modern mindset, that is utter stupidity. Why? Because you've missed out on your purpose according to that mindset, and you give somebody else a limited resource that you now are out of. What does it matter if you buy from me or not? Allah is Ar-Razzaq. If He's the one providing, and Allah, His provisions are unlimited, they're infinite. My neighbor getting money means absolutely nothing to whether I'll get money or not. It means nothing. He could be successful and I could be successful. No problem, because the one providing us has infinite resources. This is Zuhd. This is asceticism. Right? So you see the environment that's created. Now let's look at the goals of the Sharia in terms of what kind of society is it creating. This is Zuhd. Right? What kind of society is it creating? Well, one of the principles, and this is by no means in any order, I'm just kind of saying it as I remember. One of the goals of the Sharia is to maintain the well-being of all people. I have a responsibility to the poor person. وَفِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ. The money that I have, not all of it is my right. Yes, the money that I worked for, that I earned in a halal and legal way, that's sitting in my bank account, not all of it is mine. There's a portion of it that belongs to somebody in need. We call it zakah, right? It's not all mine. I have a duty, I have a responsibility towards that person. Also, look at how often Quran and Sunnah promote sadaqah and makes the means of sadaqah very easy, very simple. The Sharia is organizing this, right? And I say this a lot. America is built around an economy. So it's easy to start a business. It's easy to get out of a business. It's easy to adopt a profession. You can learn it. It's easy to make money in America. Oh, but the economy is waning. It doesn't change the fact that it's still easy to make money if you work hard. Right? Why? Because this is the philosophy, this is the mindset. And therefore, it takes into consideration, how can I make the pursuit of money easy? And it offers these venues. But America is not built around the family. So look at how difficult it is to build and maintain a family. Getting married is extremely difficult. Getting divorced is even more difficult. Raising children is extremely difficult. Maintaining ties with family is extremely difficult. Why? Because that's just not the purpose in the mind of the West. And so they don't really think about how can we make this venue simple and easy. Whereas in Islam, marriage is crucial. The family is crucial. We understand this. And so many verses of hadith, take care of your parents, take care of your parents, take care of your parents. And look how easy it is to get into marriage. It's just a few words. Literally, in 5 minutes, you can be married. I'm not saying to do that. But the idea here, marriage is easy. And divorce is easy. Very simple. You don't need to go to courts. You don't need to have 2 years of hearings. You don't need to hire lawyers and spend $80,000. Divorce is simply the man saying, I divorce you, or the woman getting a khula, right? Dissolving an annulment of the marriage. The dowry is already known. Pay the deferred dowry. She goes back to her home, her father. He continues. That's the end of story. Easy. But now, these young men and women, I had to pay $100,000 to get married, just to start my life. And now I have to also consider, what if divorce happens, she gets 50, and now the problem is women are making more money than men, a lot of men, and now he gets 50% of hers. It's like, whoa, what's going on here? And now some women are having to pay child support to the man, and alimony to the man. Is this rational anyway? This is nonsense, right? That's my marriage family tangent, rant for today. The idea is, Islam, part of the zuhd that it creates in the mindset of the Muslim, is that not everything I possess is mine, even if I made it myself. There's a right for other people. I have a responsibility for other people. Islam makes the venues that are essential to a healthy society easy to get in, easy to get out. It promotes reconciliation, attributes reward to reconciliation, provides the guidelines and the tools to maintain a healthy family. Right? In the Western world, in the globe today, and this is one of the reasons why families are falling apart. There's not a single course. As far as I remember, there's not a single unit in any course, in any subject, that talks about how to be a good husband, how to be a good wife, how to be a good mother, how to be a good father. Is there? Yet there are so much about business and learning about business, and you have to take all these different fields. Why? To be a productive person in the business world, in the economy. This isn't random. It's the mindset. Right? Priorities are off, and you have this problem. The Western world created a system that is for the world, whereas Islam comes and creates the balance. How do you live a healthy life while also making your pursuit for the afterlife tenable, right? Plausible. Other things that creates a type of zuhud in the world, in the mind of the Muslim, is that your ability to be healthy is divided into your bodily well-being, your psychological well-being, and your spiritual well-being. It's a balance of the three. And hence, ibadat is what? Is addressing all three. Prayer, you pray with your body, you pray with your mind, and you pray with your soul. That's a true prayer. Okay, zakah is more of a body, like a money. Right? You're using your body to give money, but there's a psychology behind it. Right? I feel safe sacrificing some of my money. Right? I feel safe doing that. Because the first time you do it, oh my God, am I going to be okay? Especially those who are younger and their early phases of marriage and the stress of the financial stress becomes real, and they're still early in their career, they're not making too much money, and now they have to give zakah. Oh my God, am I going to be able to, can I do this? Right? There's a psychological battle there. But they do it and then they see, okay, I'm okay. They do it again, okay, I'm doing even better, and they do it a third time, I'm doing even better and better. It creates a mindset where my sacrifices for other people doesn't harm me. In fact, it strengthens me. Right? So you have that going on as well, among other things. So the idea here is that when we practice Islam, that is asceticism. Because it addresses the mind, body, and soul in a healthy way that keeps everything in balance. Where you give the world its right, and you give your afterlife its right. And in your pursuit of these two, you don't neglect the rights of others. That's true asceticism. And that's our navigation of this world. This is how we reconcile between these two realities. And the other aspect is zuhd fi nafsik, zuhud of yourself, or within yourself. And this is the most difficult and the most tiring. This is the most difficult type of zuhud. Why is it so difficult? Well, what is it? Zuhud of the self is really when you start to maintain your what's called the actions of the heart, like tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, patience, not being envious, dealing with your envy, dealing with your stinginess, these things. These are the true difficulties. And I remember when Ibn Qayyim was the first person I ever read for. I read his books when I first started seeking knowledge. And in one of his books, he goes on like a long maw'idah, a long kind of encouragement of the reader. Like, you got to be patient, and every time you feel like you're getting slower, be patient. Life is short. And I'm sitting there reading. I'm like, it's not that hard. It's easy. So I just didn't understand where he's coming from. And then once you get married, and you have children, you have all these responsibilities, sometimes fulfilling your sunnah prayers becomes difficult. And it becomes a type of jihad, a type of struggle. And maintaining your relationship with Allah becomes a battle. Trying to really be consistent in your remembrance of Allah. It's not easy anymore. It's difficult. And so I said, subhanAllah, look how I wasn't there. So I didn't understand what he was saying. So the zuhud of the self is about promoting and strengthening those actions of the hearts that I mentioned, tawakkul, raja, having dependence on Allah, patience for the sake of Allah, hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being generous, avoiding stinginess, avoiding envy, among these other things. That's the true battle. That's the most difficult battle. Because the heart, you can't tame the heart. Right? And it's constantly flipping, and we'll continue inshallah after Adhan.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
So to conclude here, what is asceticism of the self? Asceticism of the self is when the self no longer influences your behaviors. Your ego no longer plays a role, your anger, your desires, none of that play a role. Well, what's playing a role is solely what Allah wants, what is pleasing to Allah. Why do I do something versus why I don't do something? If I'm between two decisions, how do I make the decision? Based on desire? No, I look at it in terms of, well, what is more pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And that's difficult. Anybody who claims that they have reached this level, just that claim in of itself is evidence that they haven't reached this level. And for the average Muslim who's actually trying to implement this, it's going to be an on and off type thing. Sometimes you're successful at doing it, sometimes you're not successful at doing it. But by all means, do it to the best of your ability. And this really is built on love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the more you love Allah, then the more you'll want to please the one you love subhanahu wa ta'ala. So asceticism of the self is when we reduce how much our self influences our decisions. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among them. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in.